We are back on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio News Talk, 1180, 1230 KGEO, 1410 KERI, 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and now 3 times a week on the Internet nationwide. My guest by phone, Scott Lipton, the Grassroots Director and part of the Fed Up at the Pump Coalition. So, Scott, we're looking at, minimum of 15 to 70 cents a gallon increase, for gas prices that are already outrageous in California. I mean, it's amazing. You go across the border and see the substantial difference between the two. So who's this going to hit the hardest? Who's going to be affected most by this?
Yeah, Marty, it's a great question. Unfortunately, it's the folks who can afford it the least. There was a recent study put out that Assemblyman Perea retweeted, which is how I found out about it. And Assemblyman Perea, by the way, is a strong advocate for the delay of these regulations. And he actually sent a letter along with 12 of his Democratic colleagues to Mary Nichols asking her for a delay in these regulations. So
really?
We're very thankful to the Assemblyman from Fresno for his efforts on that. Kristen Olson, Republican Minority Leader in the State Assembly, also sent a letter to Miss Nichols, who's the CARB chairwoman, asking for a delay. If you notice, Marty, it's legislators from the Central Valley that are taking the lead on this in a bipartisan way. And the reason for that is because it's the Central Valley that's going to be hit the hardest.
Sure. As
I mentioned before I started talking about those letters, Assemblyman Perea tweeted a study that said the average commute in the Central Valley is 110 miles a day. And, these are folks who can't afford an electric car. These are folks who can't afford a hybrid. These are folks who are driving the vehicle that they've had because that's all they've got. And it's going to hit them the hardest because these are the most fuel inefficient vehicles. So they're going to be putting that much more gas in their tank. These are folks who are already suffering from widespread drought, who are already suffering from one of the worst economic recessions we've had since the 30s, the 1930s. These are folks who really just can't take anymore.
Sure. These
are the folks who this increase, this tax increase for a gallon of gas is really is effectively going to be the difference in putting food on their table 1 week out of each month.
It's crazy. You're looking at seniors on fixed incomes that are going to be definitely affected. And like you say...
I can go down the list, Marty. Seniors on fixed income, folks in the Central Valley, the travel and tourism industry, they're there in the valley, Yosemite Valley, Sierra, Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Park, Devil's Postpile, all of our great parks and monuments that we have here in the state. They rely on RVers. They rely on folks driving to these locations. There is no effective and clean transportation mechanism to these locations. They drive. And so all of those thousands and millions of jobs that are associated with the travel and tourism industry are going to be substantially affected. Students, folks driving to UC Riverside, UC Merced and CSU, Cal State Fresno and Cal State Bakersfield, these are, or UC, these are the folks who are going to be affected as well, again, because they have a limited budget. It's going to be the difference between going to school or affording the books they need for school.
Yes.
We're really asking the legislature not to eliminate this program, but to take a step back and to say, what's the better way of doing this that's not volatile, that's not in a inefficient government-regulated option scheme, subject to market manipulation, right? What's a way to do this where it impacts everyone fairly, where it makes the most sense, and still achieves their desired goals? So that's why we're asking for a 3-month delay.
You bet.
Let me just add to that, Marty. it was in the LA Times this morning that, and I can't remember the gentleman's first name, but Steyer, the billionaire from the Silicon Valley or Los Angeles, who has sort of made it his mission to advance the environmental issues as a campaign issue across the country. You know, he's talked about putting $100 million of his own money behind this effort.
Wow.
So this billionaire, who, 76 cents a gallon may not mean a whole lot to him, he said publicly in the LA Times yesterday that he's going to spend every available resource to make sure that this secret, hidden regulation goes into effect on January 1.
Is going to go into effect, you said?
That it will go into effect on January 1.
Okay, so he's for it.
Yeah, and he's going to fight this delay. And he's going to use all of his billions and millions to fight that. And the reality is he doesn't. He can afford this, right? He can sit there in his Tony condo in L.A. or Malibu or Venice or wherever he lives and talk about clean air, and he doesn't realize how this is going to impact the pocketbook of folks in your listeners and folks across California who are barely making ends meet.
Exactly. Our guest, Scott Lipton, Grassroots Director of the Fed Up at the Pump Coalition. So, Scott, that website again is www.fedupatthepump.org.
Yep, and then right from that website, you can either join the coalition and you can send a letter to the governor by clicking Take Action Now or Take Action, and it's just a couple pieces of information, and you can send a letter to Governor Brown telling him to back off.
I looked on their website, the Air Resources Board, just to see what they had to say about this bill. I mean, not this bill, about this initiative. And they're looking at, I guess what it does is it's going to cap California greenhouse emissions at 1990 levels. So, on the surface of it, you look at it and go, okay, what's wrong with that? But at what cost?
Yeah. Well, Marty, I got to applaud you that you were able to find anything about fuels under the cap on the CARB website is astonishing. CARB has very pointedly done everything they can to keep this hidden from the California consumer. So congratulations on being able to find anything about it.
Well, I have to tell you, Scott, there's no numbers there. There was no numbers. All it was an explanation as to what. When you were looking at numbers as far as what the costs are going to be, it wasn't there. The only place you get that is from you.
So this cost is calculated as a very complicated mathematical formula, but it's directly derived from the price of a ton of carbon. Mm-hmm. And you buy a credit that equates to 1 ton of carbon. And right now, those carbon prices equal about 15 cents per gallon of gas when you do that conversion. So that's how we're getting the cost, Marty. The cost of the California economy, when you add in fuels under the cap being subject to cap and trade, which, by the way, again, California would be the only jurisdiction in the world that does this. Even Australia backed off recently, including transportation fuels as part of their cap and trade scheme because they realized the impact it was going to have on their consumers. But, when you combine that with CARB's effort to get us to adopt low-carbon fuel, and I'm using air quotes when I say that, Marty, and subsidizing those technologies to get them ready for market, it's going to increase gas prices even more when you start mandating that California fuels contain a certain percentage of low-carbon fuel. So, CARB really is promulgating this double whammy to Californians. We went back and researched a lot about what's been said about fuels under the cap, Marty, and what I will share with you is that in in an interview or a scientific journal article that Mary Nichols, who's the chair of CARB, authored. She said it is her vision that California have a European gas tax model. And I don't know how familiar you are with European gas prices, but they work out to be about $7 to $10 per gallon of gas.
Yep.
So this is the chairwoman of the California Air Resources Board, a gubernatorial appointee. Jerry Brown appointed her, or reappointed her, and she has publicly said it is her vision that California have a $7 to $10 per gallon gas prices.
Yeah.
So this is the first step toward that vision of hers. I'm going to have to, per se.
Yeah, I'm going to have to call it at that for us. So the website again is www.fedupatthepump.org. Please look at this because we're looking at 15 to 75 cents a gallon more in gas. Scott, thank you so much for the time, and we'd love to have you back just before the election so we can talk about this again.
Look forward to it. Marty, thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Current Radio News Talk 1180.